The unthinkable things that happened to Catherine of Aragon. How to be dumped, disgrace, and still die a queen. Oh, honey, gather your rosary beads and buckle those bodices, because today we're diving into the absolutely biblical level trauma that befell Catherine of Aragon, a queen who deserved a crown and got a divorce hearing instead. This is the woman who married for duty, stayed for love, and then watched her life unravel because her husband's libido and ego couldn't fit in the same room. This is not your average Tudor tragedy. This is the long, brutal, soul-crushing saga of Catherine, Princess of Spain, Queen of England, and Henry VIII's first and forever problem. Part 1. Spanish royalty or political porn. Let's rewind to 1485. Catherine was born into the most Catholic, most powerful, most extra royal house in Europe, daughter of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, aka the power couple who united Spain and kicked out the Moors. From birth, Catherine wasn't so much a child as she was a diplomatic strategy. At just 3 years old, she was engaged to Prince Arthur of England. Yes, 3. While most toddlers were learning to walk, Catherine was being measured for a wedding gown and shipped off to learn Tudor politics. She finally arrived in England in 1501 and married Arthur at age 15. And just 6 months later, boom, Arthur was dead. Allegedly from sweating sickness, though honestly it might have been the shock of Tudor plumbing. But did they consummate the marriage? That, my loves, became the most litigated sex question in British history. Catherine swore they didn't. Henry VIII later claimed they absolutely did. One of them was lying. The other was trying to survive. Part 2. Henry's wife, England's queen, but only by technicality. After Arthur's death, Catherine spent 7 long, lonely years in England. Poor, isolated, practically ignored. She was stuck in diplomatic limbo while the men around her argued about whether she was worth keeping, like a royal lost property item. Enter Prince Henry, Arthur's younger brother, tall, handsome, athletic, and 100% convinced God had chosen him to marry his brother's widow and fix England's Spanish alliance. In 1509 they tied the knot. Catherine finally became Queen of England, and for a while she slayed. She was intelligent, multilingual, well-loved, pious, fashionable, and even rode into battle in full armour while pregnant. But the honeymoon didn't last. Why? Because the Tudor curse struck again. Part 3. The tragedy of tiny coffins. Catherine's greatest sorrow, and the unthinkable thing that truly broke her, was the loss of child after child. She had 6 pregnancies. One son lived for 52 days. The rest were miscarried, stillborn, or died shortly after birth. In an era obsessed with male heirs, this was not just personal heartbreak, it was political failure. Only one child survived, Princess Mary, and while Catherine adored her daughter, Henry wanted a son, preferably alive, preferably immediately. Instead of offering support, Henry offered Anne Boleyn. Part 4. The Other Woman and the Worst Midlife Crisis in History. Henry became infatuated with Anne Boleyn, a woman who gave him flirtation, headaches, and absolutely no sex, until he put a crown on her head. Now, instead of just cheating, Henry decided to commit to the full-blown nuclear option, annulment. And this is where Catherine's strength becomes legendary. Because instead of slinking away quietly like some unwanted court pet, she stood up in court, looked Henry in the eye, and delivered one of the greatest monologues in history. When you first had me, I take God to be my judge. I was a true maid without touch of man. She told the court, the king, and literally God, that she was his wife, his queen, and not going anywhere. Did it work? Of course not. This was Henry VIII, not a man known for logic or emotional maturity. Part 5. Exile and Humiliation. What followed was nothing short of state-sponsored cruelty. Catherine was banished from court. Her jewels were taken, her royal title stripped. her servants removed. She wasn't even allowed to see her daughter Mary. Letters between them were censored or stolen. It was psychological torture, dressed up as politics. She was moved from castle to castle like some unwanted house guest, eventually ending up at Kimbleton Castle, damp, cold, and increasingly ill. Anne Boleyn strutted around in her old gowns. Henry declared himself head of the church. Catherine? She refused to acknowledge the divorce, the new queen, or the new religion. To her dying breath she signed her letters, Catherine the Queen. Part 6. Death of a Queen, and a saint in everything but name. On January 7th, 1536, Catherine of Aragon died, likely from cancer or heart failure, but some whispered that she was poisoned. Henry didn't attend the funeral. Mary wasn't allowed to go. Catherine was buried as a dowager princess, not a queen, in a nun's habit, in Peterborough Cathedral. Henry was too busy jousting and celebrating Anne's latest pregnancy. Spoiler, that didn't end well either. But here's the twist. England never stopped loving her. Even Protestant chroniclers called her noble, the queen who wouldn't be erased. Catherine of Aragon wasn't just the first wife. She was the first line of resistance to Henry's spiral into tyranny. She was a woman who endured unthinkable loss, relentless cruelty, and public humiliation, and never stopped believing in her truth. She died alone, but she died a queen. And if that's not power, I don't know what is.